Raymond. Hello, Sunday. Everybody Loves Raymond, ELR 360 Live, telling everybody that we are live. Now, maybe I have audio, maybe the audio wasn't there at the beginning. Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome to Everybody Loves Raymond 360 Live on Sunday. Yes, good evening. Hello, Tom McGowan, that's a good sign. Hello, Wendell Poons in the UK. Hello, Bobby in Hawaii. Hello, Gil, my trusted. Gil, you're gonna be my audio producer person. Hello, Teresa in Chicago. Is it snowing yet in Chicago? Yes, everybody, very excited to see Tom McGowan. Tom is going to be a delight. He has a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of history with our friend Phil. So let's just see. Hello, everybody. Yes, hello, Australia. Hello, Arizona. Hello. Oh, my goodness. Look who popped in. Tom McGowan.
Hello.
Live. All right, Tom, I'm going to just plug in a mic so that, let's see. Yes. A little loud. There we go. Now, can you hear me okay, Tom?
I can, thank you.
Okay, great. You're so polite, yes. All right, Tom. So we have, let me just paint because when I saw you and I said, hey, Tom, can you come on? And you said, sure, I'll do it, hoping that I would never ask you. But in fact, today has come. I started this when, Phil was just starting to launch, I think, season 12 of Somebody Feed Phil. And I said, let me help out. Let me help him promo a little. And Phil was one of my first, if not my first interviewee. But the bigger picture is I wanted to tell the story of a show from beginning to end. So not just the stars and the co-stars, but also let's talk to craft services. Let's pull back the veil of mystery. And I had read the Desi Arnaz autobiography, and I was like, boy, I wish other people had written their perspective, right? So I read, the writers, I read Desi's, but kind of nobody else from the show. So for the people that have been watching this for a year, we're doing every angle. So you have one of the most unique perspectives about the beginning of Everybody Loves Raymond, because you go back not to right when Everybody Loves Raymond happened as an actor who gets cast. You are pretty much ground zero of Phil's beginning in theater college training. So let's go back to him.
Yes, I met Phil when I was 18 years old, so decades ago, at Hofstra University, which is where Ray was a graduate on Everybody Loves Raymond from Hofstra. He wears T-shirts and things.
Yeah, and Hofstra, Tom, only because we have this global audience and we're very much aware of stuff. Hofstra University is in Long Island, which is on the East Coast of the United States.
Yes, and Phil and I went there because they had a good drama program, but they also did have a good journalist program, which would have made sense for Ray's character. But Phil and I met, I think, at the end, near the end of the first semester, and it was just one of those things. We've been the best of friends ever since. 40 years later, we moved to New York together. We sort of moved to LA, in the same sort of year time span, and we've just, I've worked with him as an actor. He is a terrific actor, really funny. We did a lot of great shows together in Summer Stock. We did a summer of Summer Stock. We did a lot of shows at Hofstra together, and we hit the city. We hit New York trying to make it as actors.
Right. So just going back in the big picture, he's on Long Island. Tom and Phil are on Long Island. Long Island is not the city. So when we say the city, even though to somebody in Iowa, Long Island is a crazy amount of people, but to go to Manhattan is the city. So now, can we now go back, stay in college just a little bit?
Of course.
Yeah. Because as a theater major, generally the theater major future is just up, and all jokes aside, theater is so unlike a more linear, like, I'm going to take accounting, then I will work for an accounting firm, and then maybe I'll be a partner. So theater is, you take theater and then your future is really uncertain.
Yes, absolutely. And I would have studied something else if anything else interested me, and nothing else did. And I auditioned, and they gave me a scholarship, and I was like, well, my parents were like, well, maybe that's enough of a pat in the back to at least try it. But they had no actors in my family. They had no idea what I was going to do with my life. But you know, we worked hard, Phil and I. You know, we took an occasional day off, but we worked hard, and you know, he was always and still is the funniest person I ever met. So we had a lot of laughs, and we each had singles a freshman year, and Phil had a television. Now he had like a 12-inch television.
Yeah. So sorry, a single means you had your own room.
We had our own room somehow as freshmen.
Yes.
And well, we had roommates, I think, the first semester, and we had singles the second semester or something like that. And somehow Phil had a 12-inch television, which was, no one had televisions then. Nobody. It was like a huge, like if someone would bring, everyone had a stereo, but no one had television. So after class, every night, just about every night of the week, Phil would be laying on his single bed. I would be sitting at the foot of it. The TV is on like his little dresser, and we would watch Johnny Carson, and then Tom Snyder, and then an hour of Mary Tyler Moore. 2 episodes back to back, and we would do that almost every single night. And I remember him. Phil says this a lot. Is Helen always complained his mother about him watching television? Said, "All you do is watch television. What are you going to do with your life?" And of course, that's what he was going to do with his life. But it is a true story. And we watched. Of course, Mary Tyler Moore was such an incredibly well-crafted show. I was just enjoying it and laughing, and Phil was actually learning and absorbing and you know, sort of figuring out the comedy. And we would order a pizza every night from Vesuvio's. Vesuvio's would deliver us a pizza. And at the end of freshman year, I was 15 pounds heavier, and Phil was exactly the same. And the end of sophomore year, I was 15 pounds heavier, and Phil was exactly the same. But we were eating the same stuff. But in those days, Phil always loved like the good food. Always, always, always. But everything had to be the best cheap food. So we found the best sandwich, we found the best taco, we found the best pizza, everything that was cheap. We were living on coupons and the meal plan. But we spent most of our time together.
Yeah. And are you doing plays every day? Because I don't, I was not a theater major. And I asked this question, just general curiosity, but also comes into play later with Phil's brilliance at directing Everybody Loves Raymond, and how a sitcom is like a play in many ways. A multicam is pretty much like a play. So what is a day if you're a theater major?
Yeah, you're almost always doing some sort of play. It's up to the school to cast you. In those days, a lot of colleges, I'm actually teaching right now at Oklahoma City University via Zoom, teaching on-camera acting to a great bunch of students. But in those days, they didn't focus on film and television. It was only theater. And they cast you like there wasn't theater run programs and things. I think there was a theater group that did musicals on campus, but we would always get cast in something, and we'd always be working on either a main stage show or another stage show. So you'd go to classes all day, and then you'd rehearse all night and rehearse on the weekends, and then you usually only get 2 or 3 performances. We did a few shows together. Most notably, we did 12th Night together as Sir Toby Belch and Sir Andrew Aguecheek, which was a great, it was one of our favorite things we've ever done together.
And are you
brilliant?
Excuse me, Tom. Hold on, I have to take a drink from my mug. That was a genuine cough. That wasn't me shilling Phil's thing. So in the plays, Tom, are you? Because I'm gonna ask you, because this was said to me once. People said, "Listen, in stand-up comedy, you can't fake it for long because eventually people aren't laughing. But in acting," and I'm saying this to you, who has not stopped working, it seems, since college. But you can fake it by taking acting. You never get cast in anything, but you're 45 and you're all of a sudden like, well, I haven't been in anything, but I just need that one break. So now we're back in college with you guys.
are there people in your class, because no one has that confidence anyway, even for you who, you're a great actor, but nobody sits there and goes, I'm a great actor. You're full of self-doubt as an artistic person. But are there people in the class where you're going, I don't see it?
Well, yes. I mean, also Hofstra was a college you didn't have to audition. So, you could just say that you were a drama major and you would be a drama major. Now, people that were really interested in theater, they could also go into costumes and lighting and sound and things like that. But yeah, there were some people that, you didn't have a lot of high hopes for. And we didn't have high hopes for ourselves because we knew the numbers were so bad.
Right. But Phil, and I'm not bringing that up. I'm bringing that up for this reason. You have clearly, you're very talented. There's no audition process. So when we're talking about Juilliard, for example, to go to Juilliard, there's audition. You know what I mean? Like, you don't just go, I'm going to try the oboe. I'm going to go to Juilliard and play the oboe. It's like, well, could you play the oboe for us? And so in that melting pot, though, of the college, there is at least this joined enthusiasm for theater majors. Just like you said, nothing else interested you, right? So you were, and at that point, because I'm getting to where was Raymond end up, are you sitting there? Are you sitting there going, well, if I can't act, maybe I can direct plays, or if I can't, or is there, because are you learning everything in theater?
Well, I'll tell you, I thought I would be a good director, and we had some very good directors. So I started directing in college, and the truth is I couldn't stop throwing up. I was so nervous, and it was all out of my hands. And I got like an ulcer from directing, so I just stopped. And then when I graduated and got into the city and was not quite making it as an actor, I ended up going to the Yale School of Drama a few years later. I mean, this is more in the future, but
Right.
That was when I really solidified the training and things like that. But I didn't take advantage of learning directing and things like that I should have. It was just too nerve-wracking. And
Yeah.
Phil and I, we were getting cast, we were getting good roles, so we thought, oh well, we're just going to do this.
In college.
Yeah.
In college, yeah. And then, so then when you graduate, and so people, sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions. So people are asking just a specific funny question before we move on from college of you and Phil together. Although the sight of you guys every single night, not swinging bachelors, but watching Johnny Carson and back-to-back Mary Tyler Moore shows.
Yeah, we were straight guys in the theater department, and we spent all our time in bed together watching television. It's true.
Well, by the way, just to fast forward a little bit, and for people who look it up, Phil Rosenthal now has something called movie night. Okay, it's not novel, but it's his house. So other people have movie night, but Phil went from what Tom just described, enjoying shared experience of watching something, to when you, because I don't want to jump the story too forward, but there's a through line of this, of Phil always enjoyed food, and you see it now in Somebody Feed Phil. Phil always enjoyed people watching quality movies together in a rinky-dink apartment, in a small apartment, in a bigger size apartment, and now in his house, which he has a theater. So it's really that passion that comes through all these years.
It has always been, you meet at Phil's to watch the thing. Whether it was the Oscars, the Tonys, it was, the movie, it was always Phil's house. From college to Washington Heights to when he moved out to Los Angeles, it was always that. And a lot of it is about his generosity and how he loves to share these things with people, his passions he loves to, but it has always been that case. We never were like, okay, next year we'll watch the Oscars at my apartment. It was always, we always went to Phil's for that thing. We were watching Phil's when I forget what was coming, maybe the Emmys, when the Bronco chase happened, and there were 50 people in his house when the Bronco chase happened for whatever award show was happening that night.
Yeah. So I think, and as the final thing I'll say about that is, from the outside, a lot of people have, I know, said like, so did Phil just all of a sudden get into food? Like he just thought, well, and I'm like, no, I think when he had zero money, he would save up for the year and get one good meal. Yeah. And now he's able to buy more good meals. But there has been almost no change. So now you graduate college, and at that point, because you have a theater degree, are you going? What is the next step?
Well, luckily, it was me and Phil and our friend Richard Stegman who did an episode as I think as a waiter.
The waiter.
Yeah. And the three of us somehow decided that the day after college, we would move into the city together, which was great because I think if I had gone home, I grew up in New Jersey, I think I would have probably spent the summer there and then realized I didn't have enough money for New York and spent the fall there, and I'd probably still be there. But we moved in the next day. We found Richard and I were renting an apartment for a couple months. Phil and Rob Weiner moved up to Washington Heights, I think right away, or maybe he might have been living with his grandmother, Phil, for the first month or so.
In the Bronx.
But we eventually, within a couple months, we all had apartments up in Washington Heights. And we started auditioning. We worked for this chemical factory. I'm sure Phil told you that story, where the very first day we opened like $80 a day to sell chemicals on the phone. And it was just cold calling. And I lasted like 4 hours. I couldn't even make it through the day. And Phil lasted a few weeks.
Well, Phil has more stick-to-itiveness and more salesman, I think. And so you're cold calling people to sell them what kind of chemicals?
It's some cleaner, some cleaner for tractors, and we're getting these poor guys off their tractors like their wives are going out to. It was just terrible, and you just had a stack of cards. And after 4 hours, I just said, I just can't do it anymore. I started calling the same guy again and again because he wasn't picking up, and they caught up on that. But then I worked. My first big job was I was a cashier at a coffee shop. And this was in the early 80s in New York. So every day I didn't get held up, I felt was a good day. And Phil ended up working at the Met as a security guard.
Right. And just now to paint the picture a little bit. So you don't have a lot of money. You're not living in a great part of town. And what Tom was alluding to, Manhattan in those days, the Bronx, the borough, was a really rough place. And so Times Square, for example, was filled with porn theaters and there were prostitutes everywhere. And now if you go to Times Square, there's Disney and it's a much cleaned up city. But back then it was a rough place. And once you were on the outskirts of Manhattan, where you guys were, it was a really rough place. So now,
Tom, this is one of those. I'll tell you, one of the dumbest things we did, and it was because we had no money, is we worked near each other. My coffee shop was on the east side, and Phil's, the Metropolitan, was on the east side. So instead of taking a bunch of subways down Manhattan and over Manhattan, then up to get to Washington Heights, at 11 o'clock at night, we would walk through Central Park to save the one subway fare. And we would do it together, like they wouldn't just be like, oh, great. But obviously we had no money on us, or else why would we be walking through Central Park? But we did it to save a little time and to save the price of one token.
Now, did they know you didn't have money because you were theater majors, or because who else?
I think just the way we handled ourselves, they could tell we were theater majors. But we did in those days, the first thing we did was we found movie matinees where you could see a movie which was, say, $8 or $9. You could go to the matinee for $4. So we would, to keep ourselves feeling creative, we would go to like the first showing of Apocalypse Now or the first showing of some new Woody Allen film. And we would buy all the newspapers and we would read all the reviews and we'd go watch the movie. And then we'd go and get the best gyro sandwich there was, or the best slice of pizza we could get, and talk about the movie. And it sort of made us feel creative as we were, going to open calls and not getting anything.
Right. You're seeing, it's almost like, Ray Romano was an usher in a theater. So he was sweeping the floors, but he was kind of in show business because he's walking in and watching. He would walk in and watch When the Last Were Coming on the movie that he's seen 77 times, So now, for everybody that's just joining us, this is Tom Caldabiano. I was a writer on Everybody Loves Raymond for 9 years, and I am talking to Tom McGowan, who played Bernie on Everybody Loves Raymond and a million other parts in very many other things. And I'm only saying that, Tom, because so many people are like, I loved him in Frasier. Is he going to do any more Hallmark movies? A lot of questions which will go.
Oh, nice. Yeah. The stuff goes by so fast I can't really see it. I can't stop looking at you, Tom.
I get it. I will scroll back and we'll hit some of we'll answer. Actually, this might be a good time to just jump ahead, just because the questions will get so far away. But Leo in Toronto, who's one of our biggest fans, said, he didn't realize you were friends for so long, but did Phil make you audition for the part of Bernie?
No, luckily. I was actually almost in the pilot because there was a best friend in the pilot. but I was doing a show on Fox and they wouldn't let me do it, which I knew that the show I was in was about to get canceled, but they wouldn't let me do it, which was really not cool of them. So I wasn't in the pilot, but then I was in episode 2.
Right.
So yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah, no, I didn't have to audition.
So that's why, Tom, Leo, the friend Leo, wasn't you, was because you couldn't.
Because I couldn't do it. Yeah.
I had no idea. So,
yeah, they wouldn't let me do it. The Fox wouldn't let me do one, you know, and many years later, I mean, this is jumping ahead, but many years later, I had a contract with Frasier and they would always let me do Raymond's. They were like, oh, we'll work it out. You know, we'll just work it out. So it was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
You know?
I'll tell you, I don't want to take away from your time. I'll tell you another story when I see you related to something like that, but it's too long right now. Teresa from Chicago, who's one of our biggest fans also, whose family owns a great Italian restaurant there. Welcome. My husband loves your line. Is it because I'm fat? 4 exclamation points. Because he is, and he can identify with a bunch of us. Yes, thank you, Teresa, for that. So now, let me see. Did Phil make? Sorry, same question. Thank you about auditioning. Yep. Now let me scroll forward. Did you work on Frasier and ELR at the same time?
Well, you know, I'll tell you. You know what's interesting about that? They did overlap. But after my first 3 years of being recurring on Frasier, they actually signed me to a contract. It's actually a wonderful story if you want to hear it. But after that, Frasier actually had the rights to me. And then, but I wasn't in every episode. I did like 40 something Frasiers. But what would happen is I'd sit at home for 2 months and then both shows would want me on the same week. But one would shoot on Tuesday and one would shoot on Friday. So Frasier said, listen, you can work it out if it's okay with Phil. So I would quite often, you know, they were on other side. One was in the Valley and one was in Hollywood. And I would drive back and forth in the middle of the day doing a read through of one and a rehearsal of another and go back. And I was like, this is never going to get better. I'm on 2 top 10 shows, 2 of the best sitcoms of all time. And, you know, it was an amazing time. But
now, did you feel bad? So go ahead, Tom.
Do you want to hear the story about my contract for Frasier? Is that even though
I absolutely do. And then we're going to go way back again to where we left off. But I was just going to say, do you feel bad because in the beginning, Frasier, for those of you that haven't seen Frasier, because you know this is also going to Croatia, and we know the structure of Frasier was on this and this and this, but people now see it in syndication in Croatia, and they don't necessarily know what was going on when it first ran. But Frasier was a juggernaut. And so we assumed at Everybody Loves Raymond, we will never win an Emmy on Everybody Loves Raymond because Frasier wins every year, and Kelsey Grammer wins, and he's also Yale. David Hyde Pierce wins. So we're like, okay. So at any point did you feel, you know, I'm helping with my friend show, but I'm really on the big Emmy-winning Frasier because now it looks different. But then, Frasier
what was great is that Frasier stopped winning Emmys when I showed up. So I felt that I was helping my friend Phil. There was a season where I did an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and at the Emmys that year, they showed that clip. And at the Frasier Emmy party, Kelsey Grammer came in and said, "Where's Tom McGowan? What are you doing? Another show?" You know, like as a joke. But it was really funny. But I'll tell you just quickly the story about getting hired for. I did 3 seasons of Frasier. They were just incredibly nice, as Raymond was, of course. And at the last episode of the third year I was in it, Peter Casey and David Angel came. They were at the taping, and they were like, "How many episodes have you done?" And I said, "I've done like 17 or 18." I'm like, "Well, we love having you." And I was like, "Well, I love doing it." And the next morning, I got a call saying they're offering you a 3-year contract for 13 episodes a year. And it was so incredibly nice. And then the beginning of the next season, I was in the first episode, and I couldn't wait to thank these guys because I knew that the moment I left, they were like, let's give him a contract so we don't lose him, and so we have him, and he'll make a little more money, which was great. But one of those guys was David Angel, who was on the first plane at 9/11 with his wife, Lynn. And I never got to thank him. But I talked to Peter Casey. I talked to Peter Casey after. He said, that's exactly what happened. The moment you left, we were like, we should lock this guy up. You know, we like having him around. The writers like him. The cast likes him. And it was just one of those things. You know, I never got to really thank him. But again, Christopher Lloyd and those guys, whenever Raymond would call, they would say, we'll work it out. We'll work it out. We'll just make sure you can do both.
Which just, and then we'll go back. I'm not going to tell a story because it is too long, but we had that situation with someone who wasn't even an actor, but was doing warm up. and they wouldn't let him not do warm-up one day so he could do the finale of Everybody Loves Raymond. And we were like, how, really? Okay. It was, it was and it was a big to-do. And luckily, Patty Heaton lost her voice. All right. Now we're going back. I'm scrolling. And we ended up shooting on a Sunday, so it didn't matter. I'm scrolling back up. Yes, surprised that you knew Phil that long. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let me scrolling. Yes, that's a very long time.
Yeah.
And that, Tom, I love this because I had no idea that that's why you weren't in the pilot, because I thought, nothing to take away from the guy who played Leo, but I thought, what happened to just normal thing if you were a viewer? You'd be like, hey, what happened to his best friend from the first episode? Oh, well, something happened. And I didn't know if he all of a sudden turned down, that the role, the continuation role, which very few people do.
Yeah, and I don't even know if because obviously Ray had other friends. He had Johnny and Kevin James and Andy Kindler. So I don't know. All I know is that Phil had originally talked to me about being in the pilot, and something on Fox was like, you can't do it. So
yeah. And I think just because there was a question, do Tom McGowan, Andy Kindler, John Manfrotati, and Ray hang out together and Phil hang out together? I'm going to say it's not that. Well, you can answer the question, but I'm going to.
Well, we during the time we did. I mean, we'd go to premieres and things like that. I see Ray now mostly when I see Phil. If he's over at Phil's house and stuff like that.
Right.
And Andy Kindler, I just recently saw at a party. I loved working with Maggie Wheeler. What ended up happening in Raymond, which I'm sure all the fans know, is I was like the married friend. And then Ray had his single buddies. But there were a few episodes where I got to be on the set with Andy and Johnny and John. And, those were just great because it was always just a laugh fest. And we just loved, we loved working together. We loved working on the show. So it was really great. I never got to work with Kevin James because he started his own show.
Yeah, and he was only on a couple of Raymonds. And I think
it was only a couple? Wow.
Yeah, Kevin, yeah. Just to go back, there's also a different dynamic, meaning because, we're so close to it, but just hanging out, period, is tough when you're busy and you have kids and all this stuff. So it's not like, when we get together, like we just saw each other at Lou Schneider's birthday party, right? And so there's Andy Kindler, and that it's great. It's phenomenal. It's just, we're in Los Angeles, so you live very far from this guy, and this guy lives right, and then Ray's, you know what I mean? So it's always pure joy when we see each other and get together, but it's not like, and I think just to paint the picture, Tom being on Everybody Loves Raymond and Frasier and being able to drive back and forth between two shows, that there is no greater experience in show business, because acting on a multi-camera sitcom, which has phenomenal hours and is almost like doing a play, is phenomenal. So if you're the star of a show, that's great. But the fact that Tom, had the talent for people to want him on two shows, but to do that and to be able to drive, it really is, there is no golden, ticket better than that. All right.
Yeah, it really was something.
But Tom, your life was not all driving back and forth between top 10 shows. You had to struggle. So you're in Manhattan. We last left you. You're in Manhattan. You've quit your high-powered job selling chemicals. You're working in a coffee shop. When is your first anything of any traction as an actor?
I'm still waiting for it. I got my equity card. I did a couple showcases where they would say, "Oh, we're inviting agents," and nothing would happen. It was just an opportunity to do a play, and I would do summer stock or something like that. But I got my equity card doing a children's show, and at the time, it was a children's show about the Harriet Tubman story, and I was playing all the racists. And it was actually a good show, and it was for middle school kids, but they would show it to kindergarten kids and scare the hell out of them, and they would show it to high school kids who were bored to tears. But it was actually a very good show. I was living on 43rd Street above the restaurant that I was working in. It was an old O'Neill's restaurant, and they
43rd,
43rd east of 7th. So it had been, I think it's now called the Brooklyn Diner, or it was at one point, but
okay.
they had a hotel upstairs, and all the rooms were empty. They had bathrooms and no kitchens, and they actually let me stay there. So I'm sure they weren't supposed to, but I lived there for a number of months, and I got this children's show where I would have to go to the subway at like 4:30 in the morning to get to some school upstate New York. And again, just like an idiot, just walking down.
Wait, you were doing
42nd
live shows in schools?
Yeah, we would go to schools in the van.
Oh.
We would meet the van at 96th Street, and we'd all at like some ungodly hour, and then we would drive to Long Island or New Jersey or Connecticut. And then we did a couple of actual tours where we drove as far as Chicago and Detroit and things like that. So it was just 8 of us in a van and the set. So that gave me my equity card, but then still did not open any doors.
Tell people what that means, Tom. Sorry.
It means you're in the union, and you can now audition for shows that will pay proper salary and give you health care and things like that.
So it's a union job. So if before you get your equity card, when they're like, hey, Tom, there's a part that you're perfect for, but you have to be union, and you're like, okay, I can't do it.
If I couldn't get it. I didn't have an agent at the time. I couldn't seem to get an agent, and so you can't get in on those auditions.
Yeah.
So you have to be submitted for those. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd done one of these showcases, and I had a friend who was at Yale Drama School, and we were high school friends, and she was like, I think you're really good, but you're spinning your wheels, and I think you should go to Yale. And I said, I have no money. And she goes, you just borrow it. I mean, are you going to be an actor or not? So I auditioned for Yale 3 times, and on my 3rd time I got in, and that really did change my life. The moment I graduated Yale, 3 years later, I started working professionally.
So then the time in New York where Phil Rosenthal and you are there, and you're living above this coffee shop, that was a year long or 2 years long? Or?
3 years.
Oh, 3 years.
And how 3 years between, 3.5 between graduating and going to Yale.
And what was, how long was Yale?
3 years.
Oh, so 3 years also. Okay.
Yeah.
And so just because we're talking, Everybody Loves Raymond here. And for those of you just joining, this is Tom Caltabiano, and I'm talking to Tom McGowan, who was Bernie on Everybody Loves Raymond and many other shows. He played many, many characters. Now, Phil, your friend Phil, you go, Phil, I'm going to Yale. And for those of you in Croatia, Yale has an incredible reputation. It's an Ivy League school. So it's like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, like it's about as top. And specifically, the drama department at Yale is very well known and respected. And David Hyde Pierce went there also, but I'm assuming before you.
He actually went to the undergrad. He was an undergrad. Okay. He didn't go to the drama school.
Okay. So that's you putting him down, or that's
yes,
you putting
absolutely.
out a fact? Okay.
Absolutely. It's about time someone took him down a peg.
And so, Tom, now you say, see you, Phil, I'm going to Yale. And what does Phil say? I'm going to create a giant hit show, and you'll be sorry because I'll make sure you're not in the pilot.
Exactly. Well, it was really at that time, again, you're in your mid-20s, and you start thinking, oh, what the hell am I going to do with my life? You're like, this is not really working out. And I think Phil started thinking about getting into writing. And I think it was sort of at the same time we had done a play with Oliver Goldstick, his first writing partner. And I think they started discussing that. That I actually think we did during Yale, like in one of the summers. And so we both were like, where are we headed? And he had just at that time started thinking what his next step was going to be, which ended up being
writing.
Yeah.
Writing. And just so, because Phil was acting and still going up for parts and stuff like that. But I think just the life of an actor. So look at you. You're working nonstop now. I'm talking about, or in the prime. But even when you're really successful and working nonstop, very often you're still unemployed for 4 months out of the year. Or you did this killer job and you're like, I'll probably or maybe never work again. Which is the problem. If you can't stomach that unknown, it's a very tough life to be an actor. Okay. So now you graduate Yale, and let me just go back just a little bit. In Yale, are you blown away by the talent level or the teacher, the magnitude of what you're learning?
Yes. Especially I had one teacher who just changed my life that first year, a great teacher named Earl Gister, and he knew why I wanted to go there, and we worked on that specifically, and by the end of that year, I felt like I was a different actor. And I got a lot of opportunities. I think in 3 years, I think I did 30 different plays. So it was, again, you were always, I had just started dating my wife, Kathy. We had done a production of King Lear together. And I was like, well, when I get into Yale, I'll come down to the city every other weekend. Well, of course, you don't have a moment to yourself. So she would come up every single weekend. So I didn't let her get away, but she enjoyed Yale too, because she got to see all the shows and use the gym and go to eat New Haven pizza. So I really worked my tail off for 3 years, and it just worked out. When I graduated, I had a good agency, and I just, within, a month of graduating, I was working professionally.
Wow. And Tom, just for a little bit of gossip, are there other famous people from your class?
My class, there's a terrific actress named Sharon Washington who was in The Joker. She played like the therapist. You would recognize her. She's done a lot of August Wilson plays. There's an actor named Stephen Skybell who did this famous Yiddish version of Fiddler on the Roof most recently. But while I was at school, Courtney B. Vance was there. Liev Schreiber was a couple classes under me. Paul Giamatti was a couple classes under me. So there was always a lot of talent around. Yeah, we had a very good class. We have a lot of people still in the business, a lot of people teaching and things like that.
Yeah. So now, that's awesome. So now, because it's rarefied air, again, I say this for our audience in Croatia who goes, I know Yale's a lock company, but I don't know anything else about it. So now, you graduate Yale. You've gone a step up. Now, what is the next step? Are you in New York for a while?
Yes, my first year I spent at the Public Theater doing Shakespeare with Christopher Walken and Mandy Patinkin. I did 2 different shows, Coriolanus with Christopher Walken, and I did The Winter's Tale with Christopher Reeve, the late great Christopher Reeve, Diane Venora, Mandy Patinkin, a whole bunch of great guys. Andre Brower was in that company. No. Yes, he was in that company. No, he was in Coriolanus. So I spent my first 8 months at the Public Theater, which was just great. Joe Papp was still alive, so he was there all the time. Christopher Walken was, really quite a character.
Yeah. So that's an amazing, that story I didn't know. And only because I know what's going to happen, Tom, which I said to you before, we will run out of time because we haven't gotten to one episode or the pilot even of Everybody Loves Raymond. But I'm enjoying this so much. That what you just described for people, they don't know the Public Theater necessarily. You're in this rarefied air of Broadway, right?
Well, it was off Broadway, but it was like sort of the Shakespeare. Joe Papp did Shakespeare in the Park, and then he did Shakespeare at his theater. So in New York, Shakespeare sort of meant the Public Theater, and that's what I was doing right after graduating. And
so, just as far as only because of the outside perception of acting, and this is what I wanted to get to on the show. Of talking about, you mentioned Andy Kindler and John Manfrotati. They're both stand-up comedians coming from stand-up. It doesn't mean they can't act or aren't great actors or anything. You're coming from a completely different side of this trained actor who also, obviously you have to, and I think this, if you read about Marlon Brando's, there is that innate talent that you have to have. You can train, but if you stink, you stink, only you're a trained person that stinks, and so
and you think about, not just Andy and John, but you think about Ray and Brad and how great they were. And if Ray couldn't act, that show, there'd been millions of shows built around a great stand-up who can't act, and then Ray comes along and very quickly gets up to speed. And of course we've seen that since the end of the show, but they just turned out to be great. If you're lucky, you get that. You have the talent.
Yeah. So now, just because you're at the epitome of acting experience of doing Shakespeare, okay? And so now, how do we get out to LA?
Well, this was actually sort of, Yale was sort of the biggest one, my first big break. And then I did a couple of years after the Public Theater of regional theater, which means I go to Louisville to do a play, I go up to New Haven to do a play, I go to Philadelphia to do a play,
and I finally get. You're there for a week?
Like 8 weeks. They were usually like a month of rehearsal, a month of performance, and then you're out of work again. But
then you're living. But sorry, Tom. You now are in Louisville for a week or 8 weeks, or
for 8 weeks. In fact, when I was in Louisville, I missed Phil and Monica's wedding, which is still one of the big regrets of my life that I wasn't able to go, because in a regional theater they don't have understudies, so it was either don't take the job at all, which is probably what I should have done, or miss your best friend's wedding. And I missed their wedding, which was really like I said, 30 years later, it's still one of my biggest regrets. But then I got my first Broadway show. It was a show called Labette. and I was the understudy to the lead, and I had a small part, about 20 lines. And we're in Boston, and we're about to do the very first performance, and the lead is sick. And it's one of the biggest parts ever written. It was a brand new comedy written in rhyming couplets. And they were paying me an extra $100 a week. So I memorized it. It was, I was young and I could memorize that kind of stuff. So they were like, well, we have to cancel the first show, but let's do some technical rehearsals with Tom. And I came out without the book in my hand. And the director was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I've memorized Act 1 and 2, but I don't have Act 3 yet. He was like, what do you mean? Like, I haven't even had a rehearsal. And I said, well, you're paying me $100 a week. So he found what I was doing funny. So the second night, the star of the show said, I'm still sick. And he said, well, we're going to do the first show with Tom. And it went great. And then they fired the guy. And they gave me the part, and I got to Broadway. I got to Broadway, my Broadway debut. I was the lead of the show. It only lasted a few weeks, mainly because the New York Times didn't like it, but people in New York loved it. People still talk to me about that show. And 6 days after that show was closed, I was flown out to LA from Disney to test for something. I slept on Phil and Monica's couch for 7 weeks. And at the end of the 7th week, and I tested for a lot of famous shows, and I wasn't getting anything. And on the very last day, I got Down the Shore, which Phil was going to write on, and that really changed my life. But that show gave me a Tony nomination and a Drama Desk nomination. Yeah. So it gave me like a little heat to go to Los Angeles.
So, yeah, and so just to paint another picture, this is an awesome story, Tom, and the magnitude. I'm just pinpointing this one thing you dropped. In those days, the New York Times had such power that if a play got trashed by the New York Times, there was a potential that it wouldn't survive that trashing. And so the people that put up the money, if they are sitting there after the premiere and Jeremy Stevens told a well-known story of a play he was in, and they were celebrating, and it was, just drinking and everything. And then someone gets on the phone and listens to the review that's come out, right? The advanced copy of the review, and the guy's going, thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down. And Jeremy, actually, Stevens was an actor in the play, and he got a thumbs up. He's like, oh, you got a thumbs up? And then some down, some thumbs down. And then at the end of that phone relaying of the terrible review, they just rolled down the bar. So no one could have any more drinks. Done. Yeah. We're shutting it down. And so
the party is over at that time. Yes.
Right.
And so the producer of that show, Labette, also produced M. Butterfly, which was a huge hit. And he said, when all was said and done, I laid out all the reviews. And Labette was better reviewed than M. Butterfly. But there was one key difference, and it was the New York Times. So they had a lot of power back then.
Well, and I just wanted to point that out, because the play, your play, that had it been different, you might have been in that play for 2 years.
Yeah.
Not
absolutely.
auditioned.
And that's what I wanted to do in a way, because I loved the part. It was an incredibly huge part and really funny. And people, people would scream at laughter. And I met Katharine Hepburn. I met Stephen Sondheim. I met Jerome Robbins. I mean, everyone was coming, and they all would come up to my dressing room. I mean, it was a real heady time from someone who really was just doing regional theater to all of a sudden having people want to meet me.
And I think, Tom, it's a testimonial to you, though, just of your work ethic of learning the book, of like, oh, I'm going to be off. And just so people know, the phrase off book means you don't need the script.
Yeah.
So you have it committed to memory. That is very impressive. Okay. So now you mentioned, because let's just bring a little Everybody Loves Raymond tidbit in. Leo's making a funny comment here. You miss his wedding, and then you asked to stay on his couch. Yes. Okay.
It shows how close we were. Yes.
Well, that's missing his wedding. I do. It's one of those things that, because I didn't know Phil when he was getting married, and I know he regrets, I'm sure, that you couldn't be there because you're one of his closest friends, and it's that shared experience they didn't have. And obviously the dance from his wedding inspired the Robert and Amy wedding dance on Everybody Loves Raymond. Now, you mentioned the show. Phil comes out to LA. He works on a show called Down the Shore. Okay. And for you end up becoming one of the leads of Down the Shore. Lou Schneider, who, for those of you who watch, we interviewed Lou. Lou was also one of the leads on that show. And there was it was who ended up being the wife from Breaking Bad. Am I making
Anna
that up?
Gunn.
Okay, so
Anna Gunn was in that, and Pamela Adlon from Better Things.
Right. Pamela Ann, for those in the U.S., they'll know that. But the
Oh.
fact that Anna Gunn was in the wife, Bryan Cranston's wife in Breaking Bad.
In Breaking Bad, won a couple Emmys, I think.
Yes. And so that show, so at that point, you're working on a TV show with your friend. So that must have been a great experience.
It was incredible. And Phil was working with his friend, Alan Kirschenbaum, who they had actually known since before, they knew each other growing up. It was really, it was the early days of Fox, so no one knew what this network was about really, but we were really having a blast working together. But they'd let us do 6 episodes and then give us 6 months off, and they say, okay, let's do 3 more episodes. Okay, now we'll do 13 episodes. So they messed around with the show, but it was based about, it was 3 guys who were friends and 3 girls who were friends who decided to share a house in Belmar, New Jersey, which is where I grew up. So, and I was a short order cook on the boardwalk, and I would cook for these people who would come down every weekend and rent their beach house together. So it was wild later, years later to actually be in a show about that experience. But I really learned a lot. Again, I was absorbing the cameras and how to work, and I loved the idea that an audience would come in. Of course, the audience that came in for Down the Shore was, because we weren't known, was a little different than the audience that would come in for Everybody Loves Raymond and Frasier and knew and were excited. We had an episode of Down the Shore where they had rival gangs had come to the show, and there was a big fight in the middle of the show in the audience.
The rival gangs were not. This isn't scripted. This is the live audience members. So
live audience members from rival gangs started fighting, and the next day we had metal detectors for our audiences.
Oh my goodness! Well, and just so on Everybody Loves Raymond, at the beginning of any show, you're not known. So on Everybody Loves Raymond, nobody knew the show, but eventually you have the joy of having huge fans in the audience, and you don't even have to say anything, and they laugh when you make a look. When Doris
that
Roberts
was one of the great things that when Phil would show me, he would say, "Look, we're just going to cut to Doris." And we had a line for her, but we took the line out because look at her face. And then they were like, and then cut to Peter. And Peter's face would get a huge laugh. And he's like, we don't have to write. The audience knows already. And that he said, when you get to that point where the audience is so excited that they know the characters, he said, you've just made it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then Down the Shore, because now, Tom, we only have 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
So you have to come back at least 7 times. And I would clear all your Sundays until we get some of these stories out. So now you're on the show Down the Shore. Lou Schneider, who ended up becoming a writer on Everybody Loves Raymond, who plays Snaps for the super fans. And by the way, never have I ever tried to out-knowledge the people watching right now who are dedicated fans of Everybody Loves Raymond, because I don't remember the episodes as well as they do, because they've watched it 100 times and I did not, even episodes that I wrote. Donnell, we need at least 10 more hours with Tom. Okay. Sorry, Tom. Yeah.
Well, you put that picture up of me and John and Andy and Brad, I think, in Ray's bedroom. And I don't remember that. I don't remember that scene. I don't remember what that is. There's a lot about Raymond I do remember, but I was I don't know when that happened.
Yeah, so I have much better photos of you, and I was doing another project today, and I'm like, let me just put that up before. So after we finish, I'll put up some great photos of you. So now, because we are going to run out of time, let's just jump. We're going to go back on your next visit and get to Everest Raymond. But do you remember, because this is a big favorite episode, the lateness episode where Ray leaves Deborah?
Bacon wrapped shrimp. Yes, I do remember. Yes. And that was, like I said, that was one of those episodes where I got to be Andy's date. And it was just great to work with him. And, he always, was just hysterical. But yeah, I love that episode. That was a great, great episode.
And so that, I only bring it up because I just found a picture of you. It's curtain call. I took the picture from almost the craft service area, looking out at the audience, and you're there. You're wearing your tuxedo, not but and for those of you that don't remember, Patty got a curling iron stuck in her hair, and Ray decides to leave her behind to teach her a lesson. And when Ray gets to see Bernie, it's like, wait a minute, you left your wife.
Yeah.
It's the magnitude of what he's done is brought, the good idea is brought to reality.
Yeah, and first I think I say, "Oh my God, you're such a hero," and then I'm like, "But I would never do that. She'd kill me." Yeah.
I'm glad that you remember it. So now,
Yeah.
Tom, just going back, because we're gonna get right to the beginning of Everybody Loves Raymond, and then you're gonna have to come back. But when you got cast on Down the Shore, you moved your girlfriend or fiance or wife to LA at the time?
We were married by then. Yes, we got
Okay.
married right after Yale because I had a lot of debt and I wanted to share it. We got married the summer after Yale. Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, we didn't quite move yet. We were sort of back and forth, but our son Mark was born then, and so it was just too much to back and forth with a baby. So actually, Down the Shore lasted about a year and a half, and then I got right into another show when that got canceled, and that's when we officially moved and got rid of our New York apartment.
Okay.
So it took about 2 years.
And that other show was?
It was Monty with Henry Winkler and David Schwimmer right before Friends and Kate Burton. We did 13 episodes. I took every penny and put it as a down payment to the house I'm sitting in on Friday, and on Monday morning we were canceled. I made the classic Hollywood mistake that turned into the best thing I've ever done. But left me penniless.
So just because just sharing that story, when I've shared to these great fans here about Everybody Loves Raymond being at one point 105 in the ratings of like 110 episode TV shows, season 1 of Raymond, because now you have the historical perspective where you go, wait a minute, you were a giant hit, but not so. And so Ray did not move his family out the first year because most shows get canceled. You live through Down the Shore, which is maybe on, maybe off again, and maybe on, and then ends up getting canceled. Seinfeld only did, I think, 6 episodes, and then they took like half a year off, and then so you just never know, and that's the normal Hollywood experience.
It usually doesn't work out.
Right, failure is the norm
That's
here.
right.
Okay, so then you put a down payment, show gets canceled. By the way, Henry Winkler, nicest guy I've ever met.
World's nicest guy. My wife, a number of years ago now, she was on a flight and she was in coach and Henry was in first class, and she just had to say, she had to introduce herself and say, we live in the house that you paid for. And of course, he's like the world's nicest guy. And every time I run into Henry, he's like, you need me to call anybody? And he would. If I was like, listen, they're deciding whether they want me for the show on ABC, he'd get on the phone and call. I just know he would. He is the world's nicest guy. It was too bad that show didn't make it, but it just didn't catch on. Yeah.
And so then, I'm just saying that because the little contact I've had with him, I was like, I can't, because he's so famous. At one point, he was more famous than the magnitude of his fame was insane. And we're talking about Henry Winkler, who played Fonzie on Happy Days, and many, many, many other things. But for those of you that didn't know who Henry Winkler was,
Fonzie's like one of the most famous characters in history,
right?
And for him to have remained like the world's nicest guy just is a testament to him.
Yes, you could step it up a notch, Tom. So now the show, because we're almost up to Everybody Loves Raymond, that show gets canceled. You're seeing Phil all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Phil's on Coach, a TV show called Coach. And does he say to you, I've written this pilot, I'm going to write this pilot? And does he send you the pilot initially? Because it's a very risky thing to send your friend something.
I think only once they were going to make it did I actually get a look at it. I think I did one episode of Coach as a fencing instructor. And we saw, we were seeing each other, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week. But I don't remember reading the script until I think it was picked up. But I remember when he had his meeting with Ray and he was like, we really got along, because Ray was meeting a number of writers. And when, and Phil was just one of them, because Phil was just a writer on other shows.
Yeah.
But when they talked and the things they had in common, Phil was like, I don't know, I think that there's something about, we really got along. And, it was just incredible.
Yeah. And so I think just because this experience happens all the time, I've developed shows that I've sold that go nowhere. I've had development that go nowhere. So every single spring, it's not unusual to hear, hey, I have a development deal and I'm writing a script. And, in the back of your mind, you're like, I hope it goes, but you'll probably never hear, you might in 6 months go, Phil, what happened to that script you were writing? Oh, yeah, CBS doesn't want to go this way. And then it's like, okay, now we're back to square one.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens in this case.
Yeah.
You are doing that Fox show. Phil shoots the pilot. You don't go to the pilot because you can't. And you're not going to sit on the sidelines and, you're either in it or you're not, chances are.
Yeah.
When the show gets picked up, when Everybody Loves Raymond gets picked up, do you remember Phil's call to you, or were you seeing him?
Yeah, I think he called me and he said, you're in 3 of the first 6, because they had broken the stories already. He said, you're in 3 of the first 6. And he said, I can't promise you, we don't know what this is going to lead to. And I was like, well, I'm yours, and we just had a great time. I think most of my stuff was in the Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
Look,
Don't touch. Nemo's.
Of course. And I worked at a seafood restaurant called Nemo's. So anyway, but then after those 3 episodes, I went to New York and did a play. So then I wasn't in for a while. But, when I was in town, they would almost always use me somewhere. And I got to work with the great Maggie Wheeler on, as my wife, Janice from Friends, for those of you that know her from that. So whenever they had that kind of an episode, it was always a joy because I knew I'd be with her and I knew I'd have scenes with Ray and Deborah and Patty. So I just knew it was going to be a blast. And Gary Halverson was a good buddy of mine. So he directed a lot of the episodes I was in.
Yeah.
So really.
So, Tom, just for a little candy for the viewers, you've worked with a crazy amount of famous people. I'm just also reading some of the comments here. Is there anybody, Henry Winkler we just mentioned, because we're going to get back to Everybody Loves Raymond. Was there anybody that you were intimidated by where you just, every once in a while, you had to step back and go, I can't believe I'm working. I mean, the Christopher Walken story alone.
I'll tell you 2 quick ones if we have time. One was I was cast off a tape to do a scene with Clint Eastwood. And I went up to Boston, and I never met Clint Eastwood. He's Dirty Harry, and he couldn't have been nicer. We filmed this long 3-page scene in about an hour and a half, and then I was done. They were like, you're done, have lunch, and then we're going to fly you back to L.A. And not only did Clint Eastwood eat with the crew, which is unusual, but I remember him, he went down and he had his tray, and he looked around, and he saw me sitting by myself because I didn't know anybody, and he came and had lunch with me. And it was one of the nicest things. I saw him specifically choose the guy who nobody knows. And we had some friends in common, so we had like some icebreakers. Couldn't have been nicer. Ran into him on the lot about a year later on Paramount, and he was like, oh my God, I love that scene in the show. And the other one was Jack Nicholson. I spent 4 nights with Jack Nicholson for As Good as It Gets. And I was scared to death, and he couldn't have been nicer to me and kinder. I had actually, because we were shooting till 4 a.m, I offered to let him go when they turned the camera on me. I was like, listen, if Nicholson wants to go home and Helen Hunt, I'm fine. And the first AD said, I would never ask him. Nicholson would never not be here for your close-up. And I was like, I had 5 lines. So those 2 stories, it goes to show you never know. Like 2 of the biggest movie stars of all time, and they both took a little time out of their day to be nice to me.
I thought you were going to say Clint saw you sitting alone, walked over, and you said, Clint, do you mind? I like to eat alone. I need to focus
Clint, please. It's been enough already.
Yeah, I get it. You're lonely. I get it.
Nobody's talking to you.
That's awesome. That is so nice to hear. And I've seen Clint a few times because he took a liking to Ray, and Ray ended up presenting him with the Lifetime Achievement and SAG for some reason. It was blue. But the Jack Nicholson story is surprising. And for people that when you make a movie, if Tom and I were shooting this scene, we'd shoot a 2-shot of me and Tom talking together, and then they'd have a camera just on me, and Tom's talking, this Tom, I'm talking, and now they just have a camera on Tom. And so it really doesn't matter if I go home or not. to some degree. And if you're the magnitude of star of Jack Nicholson and it's 4 a.m, you might be like, you got this, Tom? I'll see you later. You know, like I have a bunch of Oscars I got to go polish. You can handle this, you know? That's great to hear, Tom. All right.
It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And the director was like, there's no way he would not be here for you.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Now, Tom, we're at a very critical stage. We're at the 1 hour point, okay, which is asking a lot for people who we're getting lots and lots of hearts, which I never get hearts.
Nice.
That's very
sure
nice.
That's not true.
No, well, not like that, Tom. So, Phil gets the show. He says, look, you're in 3 of the first, you know, whatever. And for those of you that are the super fans, Look, Don't Touch is one where Tom tells Ray to order some cheese. Okay. And I'm hoping to have, I like when you're saying you now sound like a fan, like, oh yeah, I love that episode. And you were in it too.
Yeah.
And I just found, Tom, and I will post this for everybody. People watching know, when the show ended, they were going to throw out every single script from the wardrobe department and the props department. They had every iteration of every script with a Polaroid picture of every single actor on the script and every single wardrobe change. I have those now at my house. I saved them from the dumpster. Yeah. And when they were throwing them out, I thought, imagine having the, you know, honeymooners scripts and Polaroids of Jackie Gleason in between set. I found a phenomenal picture of you, which I will post. It's Polaroid. You've never seen it before. I've never seen it before. And so I will post it. But Tom, when you come back, we're going to pick up on I'm going to scroll back to see if there's any questions. We are going to pick up on the beginning of Everest Raymond, your first time walking onto the set, because if you remember correctly, we shot at Hollywood Center Studios where I Love Lucy started. It was, you know, it's an iconic place. And you're there with your very close friend who suddenly has his own show. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Let me scroll through.
I do have a lot to say about that too, about the how proud I am of my friend. So yes, I'm happy to come back.
I do remember, Tom, when we were at the Emmys and they played that clip, and I thought, oh, here's Phil, here's his friend on stage. I mean, being played, you know, coming from Hofstra. And I should say, before we hang up, the number of Hofstra people that were in episodes. You had yourself, right? You had Susan Varon. You had Richard, who played an actor, and it was when they go to the French restaurant. He played a waiter, rather, etc. Elizabeth Herring, who was the script supervisor, who's been on here.
Yeah, Karen Wald.
Karen Wald, who was the
Did she do script early?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was very. Here's a quick question: are you still in touch with Maggie Wheeler? You two were so great together.
I loved her. I just moved back to New York. I just moved back to Los Angeles. I was in New York for 8 years. I didn't see her during that time, but I love Maggie. I love running into her.
Yeah, Maggie, I talked to as much as possible. My first time seeing Wicked was with you as the Wizard. I was more excited that I was seeing Bernie from Everybody Loves Raymond in real life than I was to see the show. Okay.
There are times where when I do Wicked, there are times where I come around for my entrance and you can hear either Frasier or Raymond fans going, "Oh." Yeah.
By the way, just before I can go, Tom, did you talk much theater Tom, did you talk much theater with Kelsey Grammer?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because that's where he started and he still does. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Kelsey and I really got along just great. Again, another, big star who he took a liking to me, invited me to his place in Maui. He loved my family. I keep in touch with him as much as I can, and David Hyde Pierce too. And Perry Gilpin and my wife had grown up together doing theater in Dallas together. So that was also a great group.
Awesome. Tom, this is great to hear. Sorry, Tom, because these questions go away, and that's why I'm trying to race through, because when this gets posted, all the questions go away. Let's see. Heavyweights. Okay. The chat. Yes. This was a great live. Please have Tom back again. Tom Calabano, don't talk so much. Okay. I'm going to do that. Henry Winkler's the man. Coach is one of my favorite shows also. So you did, now I'm reading from the people, you did 40 Frasers and 17 Everybody Loves Raymond, or did you do more Frasers?
I think I did actually. I think I did 43 Frasers, and I actually did a couple other Raymonds where I was just sort of in the background and I would just come for the day for like the wedding,
Yeah.
just to give the atmosphere of the Friends. Like I didn't have lines, but I was in it.
Yeah, there was. I just found a picture of you, but you're in the background a little bit. In the 10th anniversary, you're behind Charles Durning and Peter Boyle, but it's not a great shot of you. I'll post it anyway. But
Yeah, I know
was
that
looking
shot.
for better ones.
Well, I got a lot to say about Peter too.
So
The late, great
refreshing.
Peter.
So we will on the next visit. So refreshing to hear such a humble and genuinely appreciative, down to earth man. That's not for me, Tom.
And I was here too. Oh, that's very nice.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Any chance of seeing you on the new Frasier?
They haven't consulted me, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the whole setup is, so I haven't heard anything. I'm excited for Kelsey because I knew that even when Frasier ended, he wanted to do one more iteration of it, because Cheers was sort of his buddies, and then his workplace was Frasier, and I think he wanted to do one more like a married life or something, but I don't really know. I haven't discussed that with him.
Right. And it's all, you never know in the cast, you never know the behind the scenes stuff. So it's not like there's a list and they go, no, we don't want Tom McGowan's character back again. No, why would, that who knows what the story is there. So, Tom, a million thank yous. Can you come back before Christmas, do you think?
Yes. I'm actually going to Oklahoma City next week to visit my students for the first time, because I've been on Zoom for a year and a half. And then after that, I'm back in LA and I have my Sundays free. So I can take over your show. And
and Tom,
what's the difference?
Is it Oklahoma, did you say?
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. And what is the school?
It's Oklahoma City University. It's where Kristen Chenoweth and Kelly O'Hara went, and they have a terrific drama program and great students. I mean, it was a COVID job for me. I have a friend who teaches there, and I just loved it. I love it.
Yes, I mean, I can imagine, and you have the reputation, which is good, because some people have booked one peanut butter commercial, and they are the acting coach,
Yeah, I have stories to tell, so that's good.
All right. Yes, Windlepoons. Hello, Teresa. Yes, thank you, everybody. I will see you then next. So I'll reach out. You'll hear from my people, Tom. And then
Great.
I don't know if you don't check your mailbox for a check, because it won't be coming. But
okay, I'll write myself a fake one.
Thank you so much. And we have to get to your thoughts on this guy. And the beginning of Everybody Loves Raymond, and then we'll get into the specific episodes. But I'm excited to hear more, Tom. Thank you, a million thank yous. I will see you again soon.
My pleasure, Tom, and thanks to everybody for listening and watching and all that.
Yeah, and write your questions, everybody, and I'll answer them the next time Tom is on. All right. Thank you, Tom. Bye, everybody.
Bye.